A very good evening to one and all, and welcome to another session of TiE distance learning. So today's session will be good evening to one and all, and welcome to another session of. I'm sorry, I had an issue with my audio. Yeah, I'll continue now. So today's session will be on how to get the best ROI for marketing post-corona. So to talk about this, we have Mr. Vikas Chawla, a charter member of TiE Chennai and co-founder of India's leading digital marketing agency, Social Beat. He's a member of Facebook India SME Council, winner of British Council UK Alumni Award 2020 for India and South Asia. His company Social Beat was started in the year 2012 and is leading digital marketing solution company with a 170 member team across 4 cities and 75 plus clients across the world. In 2017 and 2018, Google awarded them for innovation in digital marketing. Also, we have with us Mr. David Appasamy, who heads the brand and strategy at Social Beat. He was awarded as one of the 50 leading marketing strategists in the world by World Marketing Congress 2018. He has a wide range of experience covering general management, business strategy, brand and marketing management, advertising, account management, and sales. On behalf of TiE Chennai, I welcome you both for this session. Now I request Mr. Vikas Chawla to take over. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Saurav, and it's a pleasure to be back to our final session, TiE, for the month of April. And thanks for everyone who's been part of the previous 2 sessions as well. So we're going to start off. I hope you can see my presentation. I'm just sharing it. David, can you confirm if you can see it?
Yeah, can see it.
Perfect, great. So we're going to get started. As Saurav said, the topic today is how do you get the best return on investment for marketing post the pandemic that we are in currently. I think there's a lot that people are saying at the moment. So we're going to try and focus on 2 parts. One is obviously how is your business and business model going to change? And 2 is now that the business model is going to change, how will you need to change your marketing, your products? How do you communicate that? And that's really how we have structured this presentation today. And if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll answer them towards the end of this session. So I think since we said, how do we get the best results post the pandemic? I think the first question that comes to mind is, when is this pandemic really going to end? And I think even if you look at the best case scenario, I think Taiwan is one of the countries which managed to kind of keep this in absolute control. But they started working on this in early January, even before China realized what the gravity of the situation was. Taiwan is already trying to understand the situation and take action against it. So even for them, it's taken almost 2.5, 3 months to really get out of it, even when they acted upon it before any other country did. And if you look at what's happening in China, in fact, they are already seeing a second wave of outbreak, and that's obviously not very encouraging, which means China had thought that everything is fine. They started opening up their industries, their public transport and other services, and they're realizing that actually the number of cases are starting to rise again, which means that this is something that's likely to also happen to other countries, and unfortunately other countries, including India as well. So the Imperial College of London actually did an estimate, and I think there are multiple universities and research scholars across the world that are analyzing the situation. And most of them seem to conclude that this is something that's going to take anywhere between 12 to 18 months, with possibly 2 different sort of waves of viruses that will come up, right? So there will be one wave which we're seeing currently, but there will also be a second wave of people getting the virus at some point in the next few months. And that's really when the virus is going to subside. And that's probably by when we'll also find a cure and possibly a vaccination as well, which means even in best case scenario, we're definitely looking at the financial year 2021 definitely being drastically impacted by by the pandemic. But to answer the question, do we really know when this is going to end? Frankly, we don't know when it's going to end. But I think we need to be definitely prepared for the long run, because it is something that's going to be here for the next few months, for whatever data we're seeing across China, Taiwan, and of course, India as well. And the bad news is that the longer this extends, there are definitely going to be many more job cuts. And these are studies done in the US as well as across multiple Western countries, is that there will be certain industries where the employment impact will be as high as 25-30%. And that essentially means that there will be a lot of people that will lose jobs. And as a consequence, there will be a significant drop in consumption as well. And that is going to be something that all of us need to be sort of aware of. And even for companies which are funding startups and other new businesses, we are seeing, in fact, SoftBank gave an interview a few days ago where they are admitting themselves that 15 out of the 88 portfolio companies may actually close down because of the pandemic, which means there's almost 20% of their portfolio is not going to exist in the next few months. And that's really worrying, because if you assume that SoftBank is one of the larger firms in the venture capital space and PE space, and if they are already saying that it's going to be 15 or 88, imagine what that situation might be 3 months down the line or 6 months down the line. But the good news actually comes, again, it was in today's headlines, in fact, that the IMF has projected that India is amongst the 2 countries that they predict will still continue to grow, in spite of the fact that all other countries are most likely going to shrink in terms of their GDP and their economy. And India being one of the two countries that will actually continue to grow, even though the growth will only be a little less than 2%, but that's still growth. It's still more than what it was in the previous financial year. So that is definitely a silver lining there for us who are in India. So before we really deep dive into marketing, I think we really want to emphasize on the fact that all of us will need to adapt and change our business models, because whatever we had as a business model in mid-March may or may not hold good once everything settles down. And that's really what we want to cover in the next few slides. And this is actually an interesting quote I found from 2008 when the recession was there. And I found this quote very, very interesting, so I put it up here. You never want a serious crisis to go to waste, because it's an opportunity to do things you thought you could never do before. And to me, that really puts forward a thought process that many entrepreneurs like us should be having, is that, yes, there is a crisis. Yes, there is a massive health issue, but it also gives you an opportunity to introspect in terms of your business model, introspect in terms of your company and what you do. And hence, as a consequence, what can you really change to make it better in the new normal? So there are studies that have already started understanding what are the shifts that are happening in terms of consumers, be it a shift of anxiousness or loneliness and depression, which is already starting to show in the rise of calls that a lot of psychologists and psychiatrists are getting across the country, or even something as simple as the trust in hygiene of people and hygiene of products, right? And I'm not going to go through all the 10 points here, but to give you a sense that each of these parameters can impact your industry in a different way. For example, a damaged trust in hygiene and hygiene of people and products could mean that if you are a restaurant owner or a F&B outlet owner, or if you're a grocery outlet owner, you need to drastically relook at how that model is going to look like in 2-3 months from now, because no one's going to flock to your restaurants or flock to your outlets on an ongoing basis until things settle down, which means the next 6 to 12 months, you need to relook at how your model is, where your revenue is coming from, and how can you really alter that. And obviously, different industries will be impacted differently for different aspects of these, right? So tourism and hospitality, for example, is going to be massively impacted by human interaction and hygiene being priorities. But if you look at, for example, automotive, it may have a very different impact because shared mobility might be going down, but individual transportation might actually go up because of that. And we'll cover that shortly as well. So this was actually a great report done by a board of innovation. And again, we'll share the deck with you because there is a lot that each of these reports have that might be useful for you to look back later on. And it's not just the first order changes that need to be taken into account. There will be a lot of second and third order changes as well. And what I mean by that is, as a repercussion of certain actions being taken, there will be second order actions and third order actions that will happen eventually as well. For example, there are companies revoking the force majeure clause. And as a result of that, anyone who supplies to anyone in that entire industry will get massively impacted. It's not just the first level suppliers, right? Anyone who's part of that. It could be a housekeeping service provider to an automotive supplier who will also get impacted because they're not getting paid by their OEM, right? So there'll be a ripple effect of changes that will be there. In fact, this slide talks about when have there been drops of electricity and emission drops, and all of them coincide with the recession. And as a consequence, also what happens is, while we are currently breathing, let's say, fresh air, and it's a great time for industries and companies to think about solar and renewable energy, that's not what's going to really happen. In fact, once the lockdown's lifted, all of us are going to go out there and start producing and manufacturing even more than before, meaning that renewable energy or solar might actually take a back seat, which is the second order effect that might happen because of what's happening currently. And there are, as I was saying, different industries will get impacted differently. JLL, in fact, reported last week that there's almost 3.7 lakh crore worth of inventory that is still unsold. And if you look at how much of that gets sold in a year, it's only about 1 lakh crore in a year that's actually getting sold. That means there's already about 3.5 years of inventory that's already here, right? And imagine the gravity of that, because that means these builders and construction companies are not going to get the money for the next 3 to 4 years. And that's really just for one industry. But as a consequence, what's going to happen is there is going to be an increase in warehousing space, because if you look at how industries have today been working, a lot of it has been just in time. But they're soon realizing that just in time, especially when it's a crisis situation like today, doesn't work, because you don't have enough stocks, you don't have enough pipeline of products, and your entire sort of process comes to a stop or slows down, which means there are countries, there are companies, there are industries that are going to rethink how this just-in-time is going to work, keeping in mind that this is not the end of the pandemic, which means these are just examples. There could be a possible increase in warehousing, whereas there could be a possible decline in offline retail as less and less people want to flock to malls or stores. So a real estate player can actually relook at what that space could be used for. It may be repurposed for different purposes, keeping this shift that is happening. And obviously, it's going to be, keeping in mind that there will be a decline in offline retail, there is obviously going to be a subsequent increase in e-commerce that we're already seeing. So any business that's digital first is going to be, in the market and be able to capture a much larger portion of that market in whichever industry you are. You could be an education player that's offering online services. You could be urban clap that's suddenly starting to say, I'll come and sanitize your house and make it, free of viruses. You will have multiple players coming and saying, let me find an online and digital way of delivering that or reaching out to the customers. And in fact, the Retail Association of India reported not too many days ago, a few days ago, was that if the government doesn't support or give any kind of relief, almost 1/4 of retailers in this country will be out of business in this financial year. This is the Retail Association coming out and giving the data based on research that they have done between their members. And that's truly worrying. That means 1/4 of your grocery stores, of your mom and pop stores, of your fashion apparel stores will not exist later this year. But that's also a reason why all of us need to relook at, and I think some of you the last session did indicate that you are from fashion or you're from e-commerce or you are trying to figure out how to do e-commerce, I think there's never been a better time to do that. And I think there is a surge that's going to happen in online and e-commerce led businesses, which is definitely going to be going to stay for some time to come. And I think as each country tries to say, hey, let me see how I can grow my economy and grow my consumption, there is going to be a lot of domestic manufacturing that's going to pick up in each country. And I think India is probably going to focus on that as well, from what we're seeing, with a large focus on local production and over time decreasing the reliance that it has on imports. Even today, the healthcare companies are relying on Chinese imports to do the testing and have the kits ready. But that's definitely going to change as months go by, where both governments and industries are going to figure out ways to have domestically and locally manufactured products for the market. And already also starting to understand that there is going to be a decrease in international leisure travel for all the reasons we're seeing around us. But what would happen is that people still want to take vacations. So it will probably happen more within the country rather than outside. And we're already seeing countries that are reliant on tourism. For example, Thailand. This is the Thailand numbers. Well, they've been getting a few million tourists every month. From February onwards, February, March data, it's plummeted, and that's going to stay like that for a few months. So, and for a country that's reliant on that tourism, it is going to be highly challenging. Which is why when Australia, for example, has launched a campaign a few days ago, which is See Australia First, which is a campaign for Australians to say, hey, there's so much that you can do in Australia. So once the pandemic settles down, come and explore Australia and see Australia first. It's a great campaign that's being put out there, and they're going to have a lot of things that they're going to do to promote domestic leisure travel. And definitely India is also going to be the same bucket shortly as well. The other piece which we briefly spoke about in our previous sessions is that there is going to be a decline in business travel. And as a consequence, there is going to be an increase in digital transformation. And we're already seeing that with the virtual sessions that we're doing, with the virtual learning, with the virtual meetings. And while a lot of that could be digital workplace, I think there is an opportunity for many service companies out there to actually execute the digital transformation for companies. So if you are an IT company, you are a service provider, you are a consultant, there's a great opportunity to go to your clients and say, let me make the digital transformation happen in your company. And in fact, we ourselves accelerated our own digital training efforts to launch our own program a few days back. And I think this is something we're going to see a lot of companies sort of do. And the other thing we're really seeing is that health and safety is going to be an absolute key for any industry. People are going to be paranoid of shaking hands, paranoid of sitting next to somebody, paranoid of so many things. And one clear industry where that's going to impact is, for example, shared mobility. So your Uber shares, Ola shares, there were obviously two-wheeler sharing companies that have sprung up across the country. They're all going to have to relook at their model, because no one wants to sit in a car with three other strangers without knowing what the health of those three individuals is. And that fundamentally means the model will need to evolve or change. There is possibly going to be a positive side to that, where there'll be a marginal increase in personal transportation as more and more people believe that they would need to have their own vehicle, which was actually going away because of Uber and Ola, but that's probably going to have a small shift for the auto manufacturers. And I think, this is something we were listening to from Rajan Anand, who is, a key investor in Sequoia, who is one of the key people in Sequoia, is that his question was, are you going to walk into a restaurant on 4th of May when the lockdown's lifted, or would you rather want to order from an online app that possibly shows you the temperature and the health condition of the chef who's actually preparing your food? And if there are companies who can evolve their business model to keep in mind this health and safety factor, and this is just an example from food, but you could think of different industries who need to relook at how is health and hygiene and safety going to be looked at for their customers and their sort of surroundings and places. And I think insurance is the other space that's going to really be looked at. In fact, we ourselves are really looking at what kind of insurance policies and measures we need to take care of the next few years, because the reason insurance exists is so that they can protect you from such instances. But the reality is many businesses like ours don't have that insurance at all to protect us. And this is a great example of Wimbledon that's actually getting paid out 141 million from their insurance provider. And I think, this is just the foresight of somebody who's been paying this insurance premium for 17 years, right? And I think that's really how much foresight some of these organizations have had to make this happen. And there are many companies who are already starting to adapt. And I think even Amazon is now starting to say, hey, I have so many people who work for Amazon. I need to test them for COVID-19. Can I actually take the test and even take it to public as well? And I think it's not just for their employees anymore. They're saying, how can I do this for anyone who wants this test? And I think it's just a way of Amazon saying, I have the reach, I have the wherewithal to provide this healthcare service. Why don't I do it? And they're trying to evolve and see how they can add value with this new normal that's really there. I think the question I really want to leave you guys with is that, you need to change your business model. How are you going to change it depends really on you. With that, I hand it over to David to take in the next part of the session.
Thanks, Vikas. So as Vikas has pointed out, the whole landscape is shifting. There are entire industries that are going to face a crisis, and there are others that will have opportunities. Now, the trick is to understand how this change is going to take place. It's going to take place because of what we're calling a new normal. It is going to take place because people are changing the way they eat, they shop, they exercise, they work, manage their health, etc. Now, you find that the statement says a new normal is forming. It's difficult at this point to say what the new normal will finally be. It is still forming, in transition, and that's something you'll see as we go along. The question is, how then do we market to this new normal, especially if it is still forming? This is when you need to be agile. You have to have teams who are studying different aspects. Maybe one looking at what we do at this current point of time, and a second looking at what are the trends and what is likely to happen, what will we do then, so that you're able to adapt and move quickly. So we need to be on a continual process of assessing the impact, developing strategies, and then going on the offensive, and then making it happen. Now, the thing is, it's easy to be complacent and say, once this is over, everything will go back to normal. The thing is, there is not going to be any going back to the normal as we knew it. That's why we're saying the new normal. Because during this period of time, people's habits have changed. People's sensitivities have changed. People's worldview has changed. The perspective on how they will do things has changed. They've become habituated to doing things differently. The thing is to stay on top of those changes that are taking place, so that our strategies keep adapting, so that finally when it sets, we can go on the offensive. How do we do this? There are different ways of doing it, and over the next number of slides, we look at that. One, of course, is to do alternate scenarios. In scenario one, if you look at a drop in revenue that we're expecting because of the current level of pandemic, and we look at cutting a cost to a certain extent so that with a lower revenue, we're still getting some yield, some positive impact. Scenario two is if the drop is marginal, then we cut our costs a little less and keep afloat in terms of having cash flow. And the scenario three is if there's no change in our cost structure, and there's a drop in our revenue, how will we manage? This is one way of looking at it. The other is to look at it defining your strategy based on which industry you're in. Vikas had showed very clearly where things are going to be on the up and where things are going to go down. And they're going to go by verticals as well. In this grid, you see what is positive. It is clearly for e-commerce in the short term, medium term, and the long term. And you can look at what it says in terms of how we can ride that wave. The short term, push for growth and market share. In the medium term, and do an aggressive push going forward in the long term. And if you look at consumer goods, they're saying it's in the mildly negative area. Now, what could e-commerce do at this point of time? One, of course, is to push through and prepare for a fast back to the new normal kind of an upswing. They should also be looking at how do I maximize on e-commerce, because that is on the upswing. In the medium term, how do I defend? How do I improve my competitive position? Which means you still need to build your brand. People trust brands. And especially when people are insecure, would rather buy a brand that they trust. And in the long term, how do we defend and improve our competitive position and find new areas of growth? And as we go forward, when we start looking at consumer behavior, you can see what those opportunities could be. If you look at an industry like oil and gas, you'll find they're in more dire straits, more severely, they will be hit more severely. Certainly in the short term. In the medium term, they will have to innovate. We'll have to look at other alternatives. We'll have to look at probably diversifying how they generate energy or provide energy and so on. And they will have to look at new entrants with new technologies who might outsmart them. Then, of course, you have the catastrophic category, but I don't think we'll look at that in any detail just now. One is to look at it in terms of verticals, and the other is to define your brand strategy with a fairly structured approach based on where you are today. You will know your strengths, you will know your weaknesses, you will know your infrastructure that's built out, you will know your retail structure. You have your landscape well defined. Given that, what is it that you can do? One, of course, is to plan ahead. And the other is to realize that this is not something that's going to happen tomorrow or day after. It is something that may take 1.5 years, 2 years. So if it is going to be that long a journey, how can I remain alert and mindful of what consumers feel and how they're behaving? And then be ready to capitalize on that once you have insights that are crystallizing. Speak to them in terms of how they're feeling, speak to the heart. And possibly the two most important things are think bricks and mortar. Once people start going out, how can you give them an experience that will actually get them to your stores, or actually get them to a point where they can experience your product or brand? And the second very important thing is calendar moments. Is there an opportunity in terms of, say, celebration? In the last webinar, we talked about a clothing brand could talk about back to work collection, that people are finally going to be going back to the office, and we present to them a back to work collection so that they feel good about wearing new clothes and starting a new life, so as almost a new life as it were. Mapping calendar moments becomes very, very important because consumers are going to be responding a lot based on how they're feeling as well. Remember, at this point of time, most cost-effective means of reaching your consumers is digital, because that's where they're spending all their time. And what is going to happen is this is going to become a habit. Even as the new normal pans out, digital is going to be a very large play there. Don't forget digital. Old order is changing. They're still going to be spending more time on digital. What else you need to do is prepare for setbacks, because with the way this pandemic is unfolding, there's a high level of uncertainty. If you look at what's happened in China, the second wave is starting off. That's not something they might have expected. China did a good job of containing the pandemic in Wuhan. The rest of China wasn't so badly affected. Now the rest of China is going to get affected. The thing to remember is this pandemic, this COVID-19 as they call it, is like a flu. Having a lockdown doesn't mean it goes away. It does not go away. It slows down. That's all. It is going to continue to spread until we develop what's called herd immunity. A large enough percentage of the population has already had it, and therefore the population is fairly immune. This takes time. That's why we're talking about 1.5 to 2 years. That's going to be a bumpy road, so prepare for setbacks. So we need to look at preparing now a long-term shift in how consumers' values and attitudes change. What are their priorities going to be going forward into the future? How is the worldview going to change? And what becomes important to them in the landscape of the future as opposed to what is important today? If we don't study this, and if you're not consciously cognizant of this, you might think, do good advertising, they buy their products anyway. No, they will not, because their fundamental worldview is changing. Value systems are changing. What is important to them is changing. What their priorities are is changing. So, it all comes down to disposable income and feeling confident, trusting in a brand, and feeling confident about the economy and their future. All that is going to impact how they look at product and services and what they choose to buy and what they choose not to buy. We call this recession psychology. Different people will respond in different ways, depending on where they are in their stage of life, level of income, and their savings. In other words, how financially secure they are. So you have on the left-hand side, the top quadrant, slam on the brake segment, who is insecure and feels most vulnerable. And they don't really have a lot of savings, anything to fall back on. They're going to go very, very frugal into the future, especially at a time when people are losing jobs. So this is not just recession psychology, they will actually have a fear psychosis. How are we going to manage in future? Below that, we see the blue quadrant, trained but patient consumers who are a little more resilient and optimistic about the long term, but less confident about the short term and the near term, and how they're going to maintain the standard of living. Have a better income, have a better level of saving. It's not going to last forever. On the right-hand side, we see on the top, comfortably well off, secure, they think they can ride it out, and they have enough savings for future bumps in the economy. And on the bottom on the right-hand side, we see the carefree end of a consumer. They live for today, and they're like the grasshopper which does not save, right? They're willing to live for today, spend for today, not worry so much about the future. And may not be so concerned about savings and what they have stored up to help them ride this through. I think even that segment going forward will start looking at savings, because nobody can ride out 1.5 to 2 years live for today kind of a ride. We'll have to wait and see how that pans out. Now, so we have these four different kinds of responses to unfolding pandemic-induced recession that we saw. When people start thinking frugally, this is the behavior they will go back on. Essentials are necessary for survival and seen as central to our well-being, to our living. The essentials are a must, people will spend on it. They will do even that frugally. Treats are indulgences, whose immediate purchase is considered justifiable, but maybe not as often as before. Earlier, you wanted to celebrate something, you went out. Of course, you may not go out because it's risky. But even if you order in, do you order from the most expensive restaurant, or would you order from more affordable restaurant? Behaviors can change. So the treat can also be determined by its value on a scale. The treat is a treat. How much are you willing to spend? There's the postponables. These are needed or desired items whose purchase can be reasonably put off. jewelry, for example, high fashion brand clothing, for example, buying a new car, for example. These all can be postponed. And expendables, these will quickly be perceived as unnecessary or unjustifiable. Take, for example, a holiday abroad. It's probably not going to be on anybody's radar now because it's not something which is absolutely necessary or justifiable. Or moving up from, say, a mid-level car, a very high-value car like a BMW. It's not going to happen in the current scenario either. People will be very careful about how they spend their money. So if you map consumer segments based on how we saw they'll respond to the pandemic, slam on the brakes, the pain but patient, comfortably well off, they live for today. Again, against what we saw just now, about the essentials, the threats, the treats, the postponables, and the expendables, you find how things are likely to change. For example, slam on the brakes is going to be the most frugal. What they will spend on is essentials and maybe some treats. The rest is not going to happen. Pain but patient, you find that they will go up to maybe postponables, which they will also delay with long-term payments, but definitely no expendables. Comfortably well off will continue. But you notice last three on the right are in the yellow category. They will be much more prudent in how they take treats, or they look at what to buy in terms of postponables, and definitely where expendables are concerned. The live for today will continue, the first two quadrants definitely. But you notice the postponables, even they may buy. It is a great deal in terms of value for money. Otherwise, they also may postpone. And expendables, even they would be reluctant. So you can look at your product or brand on a matrix like this and try and figure out where is it likely to fall? And therefore, what kind of planning do I need to do? And once you do that, depending on where you fall, you can tailor your tactics. You know, one thing is clear: frugality, or value for money, or affordability is going to be the order of the day, starting now for the next 1.5 to 2 years. In that kind of a scenario, where does your brand stand? At what price point are you? And therefore, from a strategic point of view, what can you do? Can you have a range that is more affordable? Can you offer value packs that people will see as being of more value? Can you offer something which is, like an incentive along with your product? You have to look at different ways of appealing to people. And this metric lists out many, many things. I won't go into them in great detail. But if you study it, you can see that at each quadrant, you can figure out how to make an offering such that consumers will look at it seriously and buy it. This is also the time to sit back and look at how you go about your marketing. So you've studied consumer behavior, you've studied the buckets they fall into, and you've looked at, first of all, you looked at your industry vertical where you fall, looked at consumer behavior, and then you've looked at the quadrant with the essentials and, treats and the postponables and the expendables. Once you've got that set, take a look at marketing. This is the time to look at rejigging the way you work, looking at, can I make a fundamental change in the way I've gone about it thus far, based on the opportunities I see in front of me. For example, customers are likely to become less sensitive. We've been discussing that at length, and less brand loyal. So what do? We look at continuing to build our brand, but offering products or variants at lower price points. Building strong brands is always a good thing, because even in a crisis, given affordability, people will buy a brand they trust. So continuing to invest in the brand is a good thing. But must be able to look at it in terms of making it affordable. Look at how you spend your money. How much have you been spending in mediums that are difficult to track, which are good to have but not must have? And how much are you spending on mediums that you have a clear analysis of its results, which you can track, and which can produce very targeted, efficient communications for you. You need to reorder the balance between the two. Good to have should go out, must have should remain. You can look at assessing opportunities. What are your strategic opportunities based on what we've just analyzed? And how will you categorize your products and services to fit into that grid? Now, you're going to focus on your core audience and make sure you retain them, or are you going to try and build a new audience along with your core? What is your plan? How are you going to address the changing shifts in terms of consumer behavior? Look at where are you going to allocate your marketing money for the long term? Are you going to remain with your core that has kept you in good stead all these years, or are you going to move away? Now, that might be something that puts you in a difficult position because people are used to you addressing them in a certain way. And if you suddenly make a fundamental change, consumers may feel adrift. They might feel that the brand they've always trusted is now gone. They're not addressing them anymore. That is something to keep in mind. Even if you're looking at a new audience, how do you retain your core? It's critical to track how customers are reassessing their priorities. And we saw this at great length a little earlier. Where are they going to be spending? What kind of brands are they going to be looking at? And how are they going to redefine what is of value to them? What are their priorities going to be? And therefore, how do we tailor our communications and our product mix, address that in the long term? Of course, look at how do we balance our communications budgets? And clearly, here's where you will need to take very practical view in terms of putting your money where it's trackable and where you can get the most bang for your buck, will be most efficient, and where you can see results and be assured of getting a return on your investment. What else can you do? We cannot re-emphasize the importance of ensuring affordability going forward. Next 1.5, 2 years are going to be frugal years, are going to be times when people's income has dropped by a phenomenal percentage, their priorities have completely reshifted. They're really looking at essentials and treats as the core of their survival. And that will determine what the quality of life is. So that is where the most spending is going to take place, which means you need to be in that bucket. You need to make your products and services affordable. If you're a premium brand, now's the time to look at having an affordable sub-brand, because that is where the volumes will be. You can retain the premium, you can work off that premium image, but the volumes will come from your affordable brand. The second thing is ensure that you continue to build trust in your brand. This is a time when people are uncertain, people are insecure, people are troubled. And this is a time they'll gravitate brands that they trust, people that they trust. And mind you, view your brand as a person. Deep down, that's how they relate to the brand. So continue to focus on building the trust in your brand. You need to position for recovery based on what is now changing in terms of being of importance to your customer, so that you make a shift based on what they will respond to. And you identify newer products, newer customer segments based on the emerging scenario because of the pandemic. For all of this, you need to be constantly monitoring what's happening out there. How are people responding? What is important to them? You might say, how am I going to do this? One way, for example, is to keep doing online surveys with your customer base, understand how they are feeling, to do it in a way that they feel they're engaging with you, and that you do it in a way that you keep giving them confidence. You're actually building a relationship and being part of the pandemic experience and making them feel that you are part of their life. At the same time, you're getting valuable insights as to what the worldview is, how thinking is progressing, how the priorities are shifting, and you can respond to them and go with them along that journey. So clearly, as we saw in the last few slides, you need to be making that shift, being digital first, because consumer behavior is showing you that. People are spending far more time on their phones and on the internet than ever before. In fact, they're spending 1.5 hours more on their phones per week than they did earlier. They're spending more time on social media than they ever did before. They're consuming more media digitally than they ever did before. And evidence is clear. And to study your own behavior, it's clear, what you're doing with your time. You can see the decline in offline media. So you need to be rejigging your entire strategy, moving from that offline, being more digitally engaged. As you keep tracking what is going on and getting a clear view as to where your consumer, your product or service is going, once your insights are clear, you switch from the maintenance mode that you're on to the offensive. You prepare for the next phase. And you need to look at this not through the prism of how you used to do things, but look at it with a forward view of how I need to do things now, able to go with the market. So what are the key takeaways? Number one, be prepared for the pandemic to continue for some more time. And we're not talking about months. We're talking about 6, 12, 18, 24 months. Even the current level of pandemic would take 6 months for any sort of resolution. After that, second wave. So we're really talking about 1.5, 2 years. Lots of companies are going to take very hard calls. And it may be that the sooner you take those calls, the better. Because if you're able to rejig your business model, if you're able to rejig your cost structures earlier, better. Because then you'll be able to respond faster to the changing environment. The good news is, as Vikas pointed out, we're still going to grow at 1.9%. It's close to 2%, but it is still growth. And growth augurs well for us. It will require that your business model addresses the way the consumer has changed to be able to grow. So we have to continue to adapt, keeping in mind the priorities for the consumer going forward are going to be health, safety, and digital engagement. We're going to change the way they live their lives, the way they work, the way they entertain themselves, the way they interact. Everything will change. Digital transformation is something you need to keep in mind. And to be able to deal with them effectively, you need to digitally transform the way your company or your business or your brand works. Do scenario planning and define your organization and brand strategy, short term, medium term, long term. Maybe have different teams working on each so that there is a clear, unobjective view for each one, which you can then finally merge together and take the best out of. If you have one team trying to work everything, it's likely to be a little muddled. So if you can afford to have 2 or 3 different people working on these scenarios, well and good. Understand recession psychology. How is it that people are going to change the way they respond to the environment in terms of their spending capacity and their spending priorities? The second thing is to look at the way those spending priorities are categorized. Essentials, treats, postponables, and expendables. And look at how we're going to ensure that we fall into the first 2 in such a way that we can continue to grow, or rejig our model to provide something in the first few so that we can continue to grow. And finally, once you've rejigged your structure, go on the offensive, go digital first, act on it, and move fast and be consistent. But at all times, keep your ear to the ground and understand what this consumer is going through and how they're responding to it in terms of their behavior. So that brings us to the end of this webinar. We'll now open for questions.
Thanks for that, David. I think so. I think we have a question on what's going to be the impact for beauty salon and the salon industry and the way forward for them. David, would you like to take that?
Yeah. What's likely to happen is that people may be reluctant to go out to salons where there may be other customers present and you have no idea what their state of health is. You're going to be in an air-conditioned environment and you're not going to be comfortable. So salons would probably start offering services to the home. They will send you people who are certified as being COVID-free. They'll come with sanitizers. They'll check their temperature and yours because they don't know what your condition is. And then they'll provide the service for you at your home. I think that may be the way forward.
Absolutely. That's great. I think a lot of people have asked for the presentation. I've just given a link here to our slide share. We will be uploading it there, and we'll also be sharing it with TiE Chennai, so they can forward that if required. Or you can check our slide share tomorrow, and it should be there. The other question we have from Shakti Kumar is we are into manufacturing and have dealers all over the state. Does moving into digital mode of sales affect the relationship with these dealers? I think that's a great question, Shakti Kumar. I think it is a challenging question when you have a lot of existing relationships, existing trade partners with whom you do business. I think that's also a challenge for existing FMCG brands who want to do, let's say, e-commerce on Amazon and Flipkart. I think one way they are trying to explore this is to have digital specific products. So how can you have a separate line of products that's only digital so that you actually have both your offline trade also going on, but you also have some focus on online and test out and see what results are there. That's actually how many of these FMCG brands are also looking at it. Maybe David can add to that.
Yeah, thanks, Vikas. What you could do, since you have an existing dealer network, one thing is to reach out to them at this point of time, say that you're there, you value their relationship, and together with them, you work out what is the way forward. You can look at the click and click model going forward, where even when it becomes e-commerce, fulfillment can happen through the dealers. You can try and see if you can work a model like that. So only a central warehouse sending out things. Can you support your dealers so that they do the fulfillment? So the last mile delivery is quick and fast. So you get an order, send it to your dealer, he sends it. If the order is in Delhi, you send it to your dealer in Delhi and he fulfills it. So the person gets it within 24 hours. It could work. But you need to be able to have this discussion with them and see if you can make it work.
Absolutely. We have a great question from Pichai Muthu on the future of the copier industry and the printer industry. David?
It's a very good question, actually. Copier industry, as in Xerox shops, as they're popularly known as, I'm not so sure. But you can have an affordable printer copier for the home, and people are likely to buy it because they're spending more and more time on digital. For example, we need to print out certificates. More and more certificates available online. When I did a search for my grandmother died before I was born, and I had no idea, whether we had a certificate or not. I went to the corporation website and I looked for a death certificate. And by golly, it was there. It was there, and I printed it out at home. This is going to become the norm going forward. People are going to have to print out stuff for themselves. So it is possibly an opportunity to have an affordable printer copier scanner rather than these fancy machines with high consumable replacement costs. I don't think that's going to work. It's going to work on volumes going forward. These very large commercial kind of printer, copier, scanners, I'm not so sure going forward.
I just want to add to that. I think it's definitely going to be a big shift in my view, at least. I think slightly contrary to what David was saying. I think we're seeing a lot of contracts, agreements, invoicing also moving digital. And if you look at where do companies really use many of these printing services, a lot of it is to do for invoicing and agreements and contracts and those kind of pieces, employment contracts. And a lot of that is likely to go digital, and likely that even the courts and Supreme Courts and High Courts in this country will start accepting those as actual records. And that's when this will start becoming a huge challenge for anyone in the printer, copier, courier industry. That's going to make a big dent.
The one thing that will do then is many companies would probably like to have probably 2 or 3 points of printers in their premises for all of this, right? And people at home as well. That might become future, not the way we see it now. Shared printing is likely to reduce.
Sendil Kumar has a question on what will be the impact in the education sector. David, you can maybe take this.
Education will probably see a mix and match going forward. Classroom will not disappear, but there will be a lot of trepidation in going back to class. Parents will be worried. What about the child's immunity? Will the child get COVID or not, etc., etc. So the way ahead looks choppy. So online education, we have already seen, has taken a tremendous surge in terms of its use. That will continue. Online courses will continue. Going back to class will happen. It will probably be a mix of classroom and online, other than only classroom. That's probably the future.
Yeah. There are a couple of people who asked around construction and what's going to happen to that. In fact, Mohandas adds that this is also an industry with high credit orientation. So how is this going to work? Construction real estate is, in our view, going to be one of the sectors that's going to be in the red. It's going to be a challenging time for multiple reasons. One is the construction itself has been paused, which is going to delay a lot of projects and dampen the sentiment. Second is, I think a lot of the migrant workers have gone back. When will they come back? I think there's lack of clarity on that. The third is, I think the sentiment itself is not going to be to do large-scale purchases for the next few months, which means even consumers that have already given deposits to builders are likely to cancel those bookings as well. And thereby, there's going to be a ripple effect of anyone in the construction industry as well. Maybe David, you'd like to add? I think there are quite a few other questions as well.
I think you move on. I think you covered it.
Sure. We have a question on modular furniture. Will this move from will this become essential? Do we need to create a low-cost furniture to keep in hold of the market? As we are currently positioned as a premium modular furniture company, what should we do? David?
I think if you look at grids that we saw, affordability is going to be key. So you might want to launch a range that is affordable, whilst keeping your premium brand image going, because if that's a brand that people trust, you offer a range that is affordable and practical, probably would be the way to go in the medium to long term.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Mani has a question on the, if every online business starts advertising their employees' health status on their websites, don't you think there'll be concerns of authenticity on the information collected? I think that was just an example I think Rajan Anand gave. Will that happen, not happen is a question. I think that was an interesting idea of what a food app company could do to showcase trust and hygiene. All right, then we have somebody from cybersecurity, Ravi Kumar. His question is, with more business going on digital, how do you see cybersecurity progressing and prospects? David is actually an expert in this area. David, over to you.
Cyber security, what happens is, as you well know, cyberspace is really where people are interacting with each other, and there's massive amounts of data that is stored for them to interact with and with each other, right? Now, crime follows where there is value and where there is people. So, offline how crime is. There is value, and where people are hoarding it, crime follows. The same will happen online. Now, more and more people going digital, already seeing a rise in hacking, seeing a rise in activity online. Cyber security is going to become key, and the people who are experts in this area will be in a lot of demand, I believe, going forward. Even people, companies like Google have realized this, and they've started stepping up their security measures. Google, Facebook, all of them. Zoom, as you know, went through a bit of a problem because third-party app that they had for the virtual background when you're doing the conference allowed a tunnel into the Zoom platform. And the hackers came in through that. They identified it now and they've tried to block it. You can see clearly that cybersecurity is going to become key to people working and engaging digitally going forward, especially as more and more companies and businesses do digital transformation. There will be more and more exposure, therefore the need for cybersecurity.
Yeah, we are out of time, but we'll quickly take two last questions. One David can take and one I can take. There are 2-3 people asking about retail stores, Kirana stores, eyewear retail. How is that going to change? In fact, there was a specific question on jewelry retail as well. His question was, I've stopped all marketing. Is that a right decision? So retail overall and marketing for that, what is it that you recommend here?
It depends on if it's jewelry. There are a number of jewelry brands which are already online, doing a lot of e-commerce. That's because their names have been established, they're brands that people trust. And therefore, they're willing to buy, even though they've not held a piece of jewelry in their hands. They know it's a trustworthy source. They can continue to spend money on their brand and shift to a more digital kind of interaction and strategy, because people may not be willing to crowd into retail stores like before. What they could also do is, there are many very large format retail stores that exist today. Instead, they could have private rooms for regular customers who buy high value items. It's almost like a private lounge where the interaction takes place if they want to come to the store. Otherwise, it can be largely online.
Absolutely. Thanks, David. I think I'll just take one last question from Abhishek Bardia. This question is for young entrepreneurs who want to start an enterprise during these times. What are some ideas? I think it's a great question, great way to end our talk as well as that. I think with this recession, with the pandemic and all the bad news that comes with it, there is a lot of opportunity that's created for entrepreneurs. And I think if there has been a time to start something, it's a great time. Obviously, it does require some bit of capital and experience. But I think if you have an idea and you think that idea is going to solve the customer's problem today, and especially solve the customer's problem in the new normal that we spoke about, then I think do your research and get started immediately. And that would be the great way to act on it and get going. So with that, thanks everyone, and thanks David and Saurav for hosting us. And back to you, Saurav. I think David, you had something to close, and then back to Saurav.
Yeah, the last question was a really great one. Look at the change people are going through. Look at an idea that could provide them something which is assuring, which is convenient, which is affordable, and which is online. You might have a winner.
Absolutely. Thanks, David. It's been a pleasure. Saurav, over to you.
Yes, sir. So thank you, Mr. Vikas and Mr. David, for this wonderful session. So we started out with a session on how to do marketing at the time of crisis, followed by a session on how to engage the customers at a time of crisis. And today we have listened to you on how to get the best ROI post-corona. So on behalf of all the participants who were part of all the 3 sessions, I'm sure I can say that you've covered the entire sphere of marketing during the time of crisis. So thanks to you for that. Thanks to you for the 3 valuable sessions that you've given us. I am sure, our participants would have a great takeaway from the event. So we've been receiving great feedbacks. So that's that. So we are looking forward for more such events in the future. So once again, on behalf of TiE Chennai, I thank you for being a part of the session. I also would love to extend my thanks to all the participants today. So thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thanks, Saurav, and thanks
great
everyone
hosting
for coming.
Thank you.
I had a lot of fun hosting you guys. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you, guys. Bye, everyone.